Welcome back. Sports to the Max, News Talk 830 WCCO festive show tonight. Joining us now, Scott Savor on the John Schuster Caldwell Banker Hotline. And what he does is what we've been talking about, working with, not in the corporate world and the NBA world, teams and players on trying to get it right emotionally. He joins us now. Scott, thank you for joining us. Explain exactly what you do, because you can explain it better than I can in a paragraph.
Max, thanks for the conversation. Excited. So I've been very spoiled, very blessed. Thanks for listening. In the performance world, right now I'm a leadership analyst, and I work with individuals, teams, and companies. So I've been very spoiled to be in a lot of basketball environments that are exaggerated from high school, college, and pro, and then on the business side too. So very fortunate. What
do they ask you to do when they bring you into a basketball situation?
Build leaders faster. Very simply put, that's the reason why my business exists. And again, been fortunate to be around and observe some amazing individual performers in basketball, all levels, coaches included, and then also on the business side too. So it's been fun to watch that leadership.
What's the difference between a great leader as a coach and a great leader as a player in terms of emotionally?
Phenomenal question. I don't think there's a exception to the rule. I believe the skills carry over. So like you said earlier on the show, emotional intelligence is a really, really big deal. And it starts with leading by example from the coaches. And then that trickles down and creates great positive snowballs for the players and performance.
Okay, let's get to the specifics of this series to an extent. Karl Anthony Towns is a leader because he's a talented player. He gets emotionally swept away sometimes in a game, but you want your star to be emotionally invested and have great passion. The other night, he converted that into a 30-point night, and he was outstanding. How hard is it for players to learn the difference between having passion and having emotional intelligence?
Yeah, phenomenal. So again, it's not easy for anyone, but a smart person said a long time ago, we never rise to the occasion ever. We rise or fall based on the level of our training. So emotional intelligence is something we all need to invest in and train intentionally with. And I believe this is kind of the new analytic right now in leadership. And it's been fun watching the Timberwolves grow over the years and get an opportunity to demonstrate the fruits of those labors in the playoffs here at the end of the season.
But like when you're sticking and you're going, okay, whether it's Towns or whoever that you'd be working with, and clearly this is your best player, and you need your best player at his best every night, and you want him to be a leader on the team. And he may or may not have experience as a leader, depending on how he grew up and what AAU program he was in and all those things. How do you begin to sit down and say, okay, we need you to be a leader for this team. We know you're the best player for this team. The next thing you need to do is what? Or is it completely different player to player?
Yeah, phenomenal. So it all starts with defining first exactly what it looks like. So when you get an undesirable call from a referee or an opponent stretches your skills in any way, emotionally or psychologically, you have to define exactly what high performance looks like or leadership looks like and what it doesn't look like. So like an our way or no way type situation. Define it, then you can measure it or score it like a video game almost, and then you can develop it. And I think a lot of people respectfully sometimes skip over the first two steps.
And there are times, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, when the right reaction is an outburst, meaning there are times when a coach has to finally get a technical foul or a player to make their point. It's just that you have to be so skilled in your emotional intelligence that you recognize when it is, right?
Max, so you've seen a million games, and the people, when they get that stimulus from the referee or the impact of the game, you can either react or respond, but it's something that you got to train for, and it's coming no matter what. You already know.
How about when you're talking about a relationship between a coach and a player, and maybe not the star player, but the guy that's a rotation player that's in and out? And we know how this goes, Scott, right? Everybody, I mean, playing time is more coveted than money and more coveted. I mean, playing time is everything when you're competing as an athlete because you can do nothing unless you're on the floor. How do you advise coaches and players to interact with each other in terms of, it won't always be a favorable decision as to how much they use that player at that time, but they can still have a productive relationship with a coach. How do they go about that?
Yeah, so John Wooden changed my life. I was fortunate to get a master's at University of Tennessee and learned from the gentleman who interviewed John Wooden, mic'd him up during practice. Same thing with Pat Summerall and Jerry Tarkanian. And it was literally starting with this first mindset with all those players. Everyone is always in the game, and that's the approach that the best teams in the history of the world have ever seen, any level, execute all the time. Everyone's always in a game, so it doesn't matter if you're dressed in street clothes, you're on the bench, you're getting significant minutes. It has no bearing. Like, that's the mentality from beginning of the season to the end, no question.
What's the hardest part about getting them to buy into that?
Yeah, so it comes with defining what happiness is. A lot of guys and gals need a made basket to make them happy. They need that to be dependent upon to activate them for the next play or the next sprint down the floor. And that's kind of a new thing that's coming up, too, in analytics, where how do we measure the motivation of a player? That gets really interesting because that's hard, right? You don't want players to take plays off tomorrow night. And if the speed bumps or the undesirable situations of the game show up, which we know they are, right, what do you do? And you got to have a plan for that. All great ideas in the plan, and it's just a really, really exciting opportunity once you kind of develop some competitive advantages in that space.
Scott Savor is our guest. He coaches the teams. Yeah, I had a chance to sit with Wooden a few years ago, before he passed away, more than a few years ago, in his condo for 2.5 hours and interview him. I still got the raw tape of the interview. And so much of what he talks about the pyramid of success. He's famous for all that. But so much of it is you got to look inside yourself and measure yourself against yourself, as opposed to, and the same as a team, right? They talked about how he didn't scout other teams. Some would say, well, they were so good that it didn't matter if they scouted them or not. But his point was, we need to play our best and get the best out of ourselves. And that's hard sometimes, though, for athletes, too, because we measure ourselves so much statistically and in box scores, don't we?
Oh, 100%. And you know this better than anyone. Comparison is the death of joy.
It sure is.
Measuring your skills, yeah. And it'll pick us off like a sniper at times and distract us and take us away from, where we're all trying to pull the cart in the same direction. So that's something that, you've heard this, a dog in the hunt doesn't know it's got fleas. So it doesn't matter what's going on. You're laser focused and you're aiming at the right thing. And that's a fun coach's job too.
What about when a player comes to you and you work with them and they're going, hey, I know I'm better than the player that's in front of me and it's driving me crazy. What do you say?
Yeah, so it starts with asking different questions maybe that they've never asked themselves. So one question would be, we always ask players, high-level players, what motivates you? They might say 2 or 3 things, and then you ask them and you reframe it. Like Da Vinci taught me, you reframe the question, what can motivate you? And you take them from being limited to 2 or 3 things that motivates them, or getting more minutes or things like that, getting the desirables versus everything can motivate me. And then you share them a ton of examples, and then they take less plays off over time. That's the goal. So that's a really fun process.
Do you think you can you teach through visualization and video? Is that a great teaching tool for you? Can you show, like you were talking about earlier, can you show the coach that gets or the player that gets a terrible call that doesn't overreact to the referee? Can you show that to him? Do you have visual means of teaching now, teaching tools that are really effective?
Well, 100%. But here's the magical piece that I found. You can install core value-driven drills inside of training, inside of practices, inside of workouts. And that literally magnifies the utility of everything that a coach does that's well, and solves, instead of maybe like 2 or 3 problems, maybe 7 or 8 problems inside of a drill that, maybe 10, 12 years ago nobody even thought about. So that's a really exciting strategy.
Give me an example of that.
Yeah, so let's say one of your values is discipline on your team, or one of your values is you're trying to prioritize defense. Well, you could do a drill called David versus Goliath that I've been very fortunate to be a part of, and I've learned from other experts that kind of morphed into this drill, where you can highlight and magnify and demonstrate so that the players can feel how fun defense can actually be. And then you involve the team, there's a feeling behind it, whatever, but you score like a video game. And you score the 100% controllable variables in this 1 versus 1 experience, and everybody's supporting David. Goliath's on an island by himself. Goliath is trying to get a bucket in 2 or 3 seconds. And it's just a really, really intentional, purposeful drill that is kind of like some new age stuff that's coming out, especially in practice.
So what you're saying is, in general, most of us, at least myself and many, defense was just like, well, I got to play defense only because I get to play offense if I play defense. There wasn't a great carrot dangling there. But what you're saying is there is a way to take kids or players and say, we can make defense fun, competitive, and something you love to do.
100%. It's the only chance you have. I mean, the players follow their feelings, and you'll see tomorrow night when the ball jumps up. It's an emotional game. But how can you get them to get emotionally addicted to the logic that the team best supports? And I think that's the only chance you have, especially in real intense competitive situations.
So in general, if you were to say how long does it take to get maximum results from what you just said, can you do it in a week, a month, a season, 2 years? What is it?
Yeah, great question. Nobody knows. Like you were talking about referees earlier, like how much do they really influence the game, or are they well-intended? Everyone's situation is so different. It's kind of situationally appropriate. Some people accelerate at a high level, like a couple of your guests talked about earlier, like Karl-Anthony Towns. Maybe he's made morphological changes because of this playoff experience in relative situation in past years. It's all situationally appropriate. So you just try to put the stuff out there, the strategies, keep them simple, make sure they're digestible, put a little juice behind them, and then let the chips fall where they may, Okay,
I'm going to give you an inside example of what I believe is happening with Karl-Anthony Towns based on conversations that I have with people on the inside. I believe that Patrick Beverley came here and he's been this great addition for the team. And one of the things that he did was he told Towns, you got to be the alpha on this team. And about halfway through the year, you saw Towns become the alpha. I mean, he was committed, especially in the fourth quarter. He wanted the ball. All the things you'd want from a superstar. It wasn't a playoff scenario. It was a game-by-game scenario, so he probably got away with more. And it was because at Beverley's direction. It's one of the reasons that they want to sign Beverley. Now, I think that Towns may have he hasn't exactly learned what that means. That he's well-intentioned, but he hasn't quite learned what Beverley means by that. How do you tweak that so you get the best of a Towns or someone like that? Because they're well-intentioned, they just haven't quite figured out exactly when to turn the button on and off.
Sure, phenomenal assessment. I agree 1,000,000%. After coding about probably and scoring the leadership of the Timberwolves over the last 10 years, respectfully, people aren't always asking, players aren't always asking, whether it's Karl-Anthony Towns respectfully or anyone else, to have a prescription that they need or that's undesirable, right? It changed my life because here's a piece of wisdom that relates to what you just said, please. If you don't have any obvious enemies, they are hiding amongst your friends. And I believe that's specific 100% to Cat's situation where Patrick Beverley shows up, maybe creates some undesirable situations to increase Karl-Anthony Towns' leadership. And he was at a time in his life where he was a little bit more open, maybe versus like a Jimmy Butler showed up in the past or someone else.
I was told that Butler did the exact same thing Beverley did, but Towns wasn't ready for that yet.
There you go.
Yep. So, hey, Scott, we could do it all night. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for the time, and hopefully we can check in with you again at some point in time.
Appreciate you so much. Keep doing what you're doing.
You too, Scott Savor. He coaches the coaches and the players that go with it at the NBA level and beyond.